The box sat on the porch. No note. No ribbon. Just my china teacup, cracked at the rim, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. Inside was the violet teapot I bought on our honeymoon. It smelled faintly of dust and soap. They had packed up my life like it was clutter. I looked toward the door. The curtains didn't move. No one came. It was still my house. But my name was no longer on the mailbox. They had replaced it with his. Just Goodwin. Like I had never existed. My key turned. But the lock had been changed. I waited. Maybe they'd see me on the porch. Maybe Mark would come out. But it wasn't Mark who came. A woman in scrubs opened the door halfway. She didn't smile. "You're not allowed to come back inside, ma'am." She said it gently, as if I were confused. Then she handed me a folder. Inside was a one-way admission form for a nursing facility I had never heard of. Signed. Dated. By my son. They didn't send me away. They locked me out and rewrote the story. I sat down slowly, my knees aching. The porch swing had been removed. So I sat on the steps, next to the box. That used to be my kitchen shelf. The wind carried the scent of my lavender bush. It still bloomed where I planted it 30 years ago. But even the flowers were on land I no longer owned. What do they call it when a person is still alive, but nowhere in the paperwork? Not dead. Just deleted. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the roof I once cleaned, I realized something. They had buried me, without a grave. But I had breath, and memory, and a voice they had underestimated. If they change the locks on your life, while you're still living in it, do you stay silent? Or do you find another key? They used to say the house was too quiet. Now I would have given anything for that quiet. Not the silence of exile, but the gentle quiet of morning coffee, soft shoes on wooden floors, the creak of the rocking chair beside the window. That chair still wore the imprint of my husband's back. He died in it, peacefully, one January morning, watching the cardinals hop along the snow. Mark was there that day. He held my hand. He cried with me. Back then, he still knew who I was. I spent the next few years keeping things as they were. His coat still hung in the closet. His pipe lay untouched by the fireplace. Our wedding photo stood on the mantel, its corners yellowed, but full of light. The garden was my church. I planted violets each spring, because that's what he loved. I didn't ask for much, just to be allowed to stay in the house we built, with our hands, with our stories. Then Mark began visiting more often, not to talk, but to suggest. "You should think about safety, Mom. You could use some help keeping up with things. This house is a lot to manage." At first, I thanked him. He was busy, successful. He didn't owe me his time. And yet he came. But then came the paperwork. Small things. Bank accounts. Power of attorney. "Just a signature here, Mom. For emergencies." He smiled when I hesitated. "It's all reversible. Just precaution." He never said, "We're preparing to erase you." But I felt it. In the way he stopped asking what I wanted. In how he said, "This house." Instead of, "Your home." I stopped keeping the teapot warm. I began writing things down. Not because I forgot, but because I was afraid they would. I called it "The Quiet Years," and hid the notebook inside the cushion of the rocking chair. Some days, the wind would lift the curtains just right, and I'd remember how we used to dance in the kitchen, barefoot, laughing at nothing. Those days were gone, but I hadn't left yet. Not then, and I didn't know. They were already preparing to leave me behind. It started small. The living room rug disappeared. He said it was a tripping hazard. Then the curtains were replaced. Brighter colors feel more modern. His wife explained, placing a cream panel over the old lace ones I'd stitched in 1981. The china cabinet vanished next. Mark had it donated. Inside were my mother's tea plates. The ones with the tiny blue thistle print. Gone. I asked where the boxes were. Mark said, they must have gotten lost in the move. But I hadn't moved. Not yet. The kitchen changed, too. The smell of cinnamon rolls was replaced with stainless steel and lemon cleaner. My apron disappeared. So did my place at the table. Dinners became quick visits. More screen time than soup. Mark checking emails. The kids with headphones. His wife scrolling through vacation rentals. I became background. I thought I'd make chicken and dumplings tonight. I said one Thursday. Oh, don't fuss, Mom, his wife replied. We've already ordered in. She smiled. Like it was kindness. Like they were helping me. Helping me fade. I excused myself early that night and sat in the sunroom. The clock ticked and ticked, but no one noticed I was gone. No one came. Once, this had been my season. Autumn. Crisp air. Candlelight. Soup simmering on the stove. Now it felt like someone else's life was being lived around me. Like I was haunting a place I hadn't left. That night, I pulled out the notebook again. I wrote about the rug, the cabinet, the dumplings, and then I wrote one sentence. Without decoration, without metaphor, they are preparing to outlive me. While I'm still alive. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I turned the page and began listing everything that used to be mine. The house, the savings, the garden, the holidays, the stories. Every page was a farewell. They hadn't spoken aloud yet, but I heard it. Every quiet goodbye, wrapped in helpful suggestions, in cheerful updates, in little decisions that removed me, one teaspoon at a time. That winter, Mark brought over a man in a suit. He's just helping me sort through a few things, Mom. Title stuff. Legal housekeeping. The man called me Mrs. Goodwin, as if I were a stranger, renting her own skin. They sat at the dining table, the one Tom built with his hands, while I stood in the doorway, invisible. I heard my name once. Then, not again. I made tea. Because that's what I did. When things didn't make sense. But no one drank it. They left with a folder. And smiles that didn't reach their eyes. After they were gone, I looked for my old wedding file. It wasn't where I kept it. Not in the cedar chest. Not in the drawer with the letters. It had always been there. Later that week, Mark asked if I'd considered a trial stay at a nearby place called Willow Pines. It's got walking paths, movie nights, gardening programs. You'd love it. I asked, is this your idea of love? He didn't answer, just patted my hand. You'll still have the house. We're not taking anything away. But he had already begun. Not with a hammer, but with a highlighter and a witness signature. That night, I made soup for two, but ate alone. The lights in the hallway buzzed. The rocking chair was quiet. I stared at the doorway, long after I turned off the lights, waiting for someone who wouldn't come. A week later, a glossy brochure arrived by mail. It smelled faintly of perfume and paper freshly cut. I flipped it open. Page 3 had a smiling woman, seated by a pond. She looked comfortable, safe, sedated. The caption read, "A new chapter starts here." I closed the brochure and tucked it under the leg of the uneven side table in the guest room. That was the first thing I ever buried in that house. And somehow, I knew it wouldn't be the last. I wasn't invited to Sarah's birthday. My granddaughter. 7 years old. No phone call. No card in the mail. Just a photo, sent afterward. Her in a pink dress. Blowing out candles. On the cake I used to bake. There was a banner behind her. It read, "Happy birthday to our sweetest girl." No mention of grandma. I stared at the image. Zoomed in. To find something of myself. There was none. The party was held in my backyard. The one with the swing I hung. When Mark was 5. But the swing was gone. Replaced by a white tent. Balloons? And new patio furniture. I had never seen before. They had painted the fence. Covered the garden bed. With plastic grass. Even the earth didn't remember me. I asked Mark later. Why I hadn't been told. He rubbed his temple. "Mom, you've been tired lately. We didn't want to overwhelm you." Overwhelm me. As if love could be too heavy to bear. I smiled the way older women do. When they're told they need rest. Instead of respect. Then I excused myself. To use the bathroom. And cried into the hand towel. I once embroidered. With Sarah's name. That night. I took the party photo. And placed it in my notebook. I wrote under it. Today I learned. That being forgotten. Can look exactly like being spared. The next day. The mailman handed me a package. It was my wedding china. 3 plates. Sent back from the donation center. They didn't know where to store it. Said it didn't fit the new shelves. One was cracked. Another still had cake crumbs. From someone else's celebration. I didn't wash them. I wrapped them in dish towels. And placed them. At the very back of the closet. Behind coats that no one wore anymore. And then I did something. I hadn't done in months. I took the keys. And walked out the door. Without telling anyone where I was going. Just for a few minutes. Just to remember. What it felt like. To be part of the world. The next family dinner. Wasn't at my house. Mark said it would be easier. To have it at theirs. More space. Less hassle for you. I brought my famous peach cobbler anyway. Still warm. Wrapped in the same checkered towel. Tom used to tuck under the pan. To keep it from sliding in the car. When I walked in. The table was already full. No one looked up. Not out of rudeness. Out of momentum. Like I wasn't part of the routine anymore. There was no place set for me. No folded napkin. No chair pulled out. Just a small stool. By the kitchen pass-through. "That's for you, Mom." His wife smiled. Closer to the window, right? Closer to the dishes. I thought. Closer to the wall. I sat. The stool creaked. It wasn't meant for sitting long. Across the room. A new photo collage hung above the fireplace. Mark. His wife. The kids. Vacations. Graduations. Smiles. I wasn't in a single frame. They hadn't taken my picture down. They had built a new history. Without me in it. I stared at my cobbler on the counter. Untouched. Still warm. But no one asked about it. They served store-bought cake instead. With "Happy Fall, y'all," written in frosting. After dinner. Mark walked me out. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. Then paused. "You okay?" I nodded. Because what else can you say? When your place has been replaced. And no one noticed the moment it happened? He hugged me. The kind of hug you give. Someone you see once a year. And I drove home. To a house. That smelled like cinnamon. And absence. I poured myself a cup of tea. And sat in the rocking chair. The cushion had a new tear. I didn't remember it being there before. I opened my notebook. Today, I disappeared quietly. In a room full of people. I once helped raise. The ink smudged. As I closed the page. I didn't cry. I had started learning. How to feel the ache. Without letting it spill. Sunday morning used to be our time. Church. Then biscuits and jam. Tom would read the paper. I'd water the garden. Mark would visit with Sarah, her tiny hands smudging my windows with jelly and joy. That rhythm was gone now, but I still woke early, just in case someone remembered. I brewed tea, set out 2 mugs, and waited. By 10, no one came. No knock. No call. So I walked to the garden. The violets were thinning, but a few still bloomed. Small, stubborn things. When I came back in, the front door was slightly open. Mark stood in the foyer. Sarah beside him, clutching a small box. Thought we'd drop by, he said casually. Didn't want to wake you. Sarah ran past me, straight to the living room. She looked different. Older. Less sugar in her voice. I offered them tea. Mark declined. Just a quick stop. He handed me the box. Inside were old photographs. My handwriting on the back. Our camping trip. Tom's 60th birthday. Mark's first day of school. We found these in the attic. His wife had said earlier by phone. Didn't want them to get damaged. But they had bent them. Some edges torn. One still had tape stuck to the back, where it had been peeled from a frame. I picked up the photo of our wedding. The one where I wore the ivory gloves. Tom's tie crooked from nerves. I asked Mark where the frame had gone. He shrugged. Didn't match the new decor. He said it lightly, as if frames were just wood. As if memories didn't live inside them. Then Sarah came in, holding the rocking chair cushion. Grandma, can I have this? Mom said it's old and lumpy, but it smells like you. She smiled. It wasn't cruel, just honest. I nodded, because what else could I do? She took it and hugged it to her chest. And in that moment, I realized I had become a scent, a fabric, a softness someone remembered, but didn't need to keep whole. When they left, I stood in the hallway, watching the light from the window shift across the floor, like it was trying to leave, too. And I wrote, there's a kind of grief that comes from being remembered, only in fragments. The letter came on a Tuesday. Plain white envelope. No return address. It almost went into the recycling. Almost. I opened it with my old letter opener. The one Tom gave me. On our 3rd anniversary. Still sharp. Still mine. The paper inside smelled of ink and bureaucracy. Thick. Cream-colored. Too official for comfort. I unfolded it slowly. Read the heading twice. Change of ownership notification. Property transfer completed. My hand stilled. The air in the kitchen thickened. Even the refrigerator stopped humming. I read it again. And again. There was no mistake. My name, once listed under primary owner, was now gone. In its place, Mark Goodwin. No cosign. No co-ownership. Just him. He hadn't just moved me out. He had moved me off the deed. I picked up the phone, fingers trembling. He answered on the 2nd ring. Hey Mom, everything okay? I didn't speak at first. Just breathed. Then, why is your name on the deed to my house? A pause. Long enough to feel like silence. Then, too casually. Oh, that. It's just for tax purposes. Protection stuff. Totally standard. He said it like we were talking about a weather forecast. You said I'd still have the house. He exhaled. Mom, you do. I mean, technically. It's all in the family. But I wasn't family on paper anymore. I hung up. No goodbye. No voice left. I sat at the kitchen table, with that thick letter in my lap, and my teacup in my hand. And for the first time, I didn't know whose table this was. I looked around the room. Everything was where I left it. But nothing belonged to me. The curtains, The tablecloth, even the spice rack, felt borrowed. I opened my notebook, wrote slowly. My house is now a memory. And memories, they tell me, don't pay property taxes. I folded the letter, placed it between the pages, and stared at the door. That still had my welcome mat, but no longer needed to welcome me home. That night, I opened the cedar chest, the one Tom built from reclaimed barnwood, during our first winter together. Inside were old insurance forms, birth certificates, his pension file, our mortgage records. Faded, but legible. Solid. On the bottom, I found the deed. The original one, dated 1978. It had both our names. Thomas, Helen Goodwin. Joint ownership. Full rights. It felt heavier than I remembered. Like it knew. It was being held. For the last time, I ran my fingers over the embossed stamp. It was real. Once, I placed it beside the new document. Mark's name. Alone. Clean. Final. There was no mention of me. I had been redacted. That word lived in my mind for days afterward. Redacted. Erased. Rewritten. I began reviewing old mail, bank statements, tax letters, phone bills, little things I hadn't paid attention to, things he said he'd take care of. They no longer came in my name. Even the electricity was now under his account. I found one envelope, addressed to current occupant. That was me now. A placeholder. A technicality. At dinner the next week, I brought it up. Quietly. Without accusation. I found a letter. From the county. Said the house titles changed. Mark didn't look up from his plate. Yeah, we already talked about that, Mom. His wife reached over. Placed her hand on mine. It's really for the best. You shouldn't have to worry about paperwork. Paperwork. They had taken my roof, my keys, my dignity, and called it paperwork. Don't you trust us? She added, smiling like it was kindness. I didn't answer, because in that moment, I remembered something Tom once told me. If they ever stop asking what you think, they've already decided it doesn't matter. After dessert, Mark offered to drive me home. I declined. Told them I wanted the air. Said I needed the walk. But really, I needed to feel just one thing. That was still mine. The sidewalk beneath my feet. The cold air in my lungs. The night sky that no one could sign away. When I reached my porch, I touched the mailbox. Like a gravestone. Then I went inside. And circled today's date in red. In the corner of my notebook. This is the day I stopped being naive. I went to the bank that Thursday afternoon. Not for anything dramatic. Just to update a mailing address. Or so I told myself. The teller was kind. Young. Lipstick too bright. But eyes soft. She asked for my ID. I handed it over. Then she frowned. Typed something. Tilted her head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Goodwin. It says here you're no longer the primary on this account. I blinked. She kept going. Actually, you're no longer listed at all. I leaned closer. I opened that account with my husband. In 1984. She nodded, apologetically. But it was updated last fall. Power of attorney. Transferred under Mark Goodwin. My chest didn't hurt. My hands didn't shake. It wasn't that kind of shock. It was quieter. Colder. Like stepping into a room that used to be warm. And finding the window open. And the fire gone out. She offered to call someone. I shook my head. No. I think I just needed to know. I walked out. Without taking a mint. From the jar by the door. Outside. The wind felt harsher than before. Or maybe it just had permission now. to hit me harder. On the bench near the corner, I sat, opened my purse, took out the tiny notebook. It barely fit in my hand, but it held everything. I wrote my money, my house, my name, gone, with a signature I don't remember signing. I looked up. The world went on. Cars passed. People carried groceries. Birds darted between traffic lights. I was still in it, but not of it. When I got home, I stood at the threshold for a long while. Then I walked through every room with new eyes. Not as an owner, not even as a guest, but like someone visiting a museum of a life they once lived. I made tea, stared at the kettle as it steamed, and I wondered, what is a woman called when her name is no longer tied to anything real? Not a widow, not divorced, not dead, just removed. I let the tea grow cold. Didn't drink it, didn't throw it away, just sat with it. Because sometimes, what's left isn't for use, but for proof that you still exist. They said it was temporary. Just a little rest, Mom. A reset. You've been so overwhelmed lately. Overwhelmed. That word again. Used by people who don't know the weight of silence. I didn't remember agreeing. But there I was, in the passenger seat of Mark's car, watching my house grow smaller. In the side mirror. He didn't say much on the drive. Just turned up the radio. Soft jazz. The kind Tom used to hum while cleaning the gutters. When we arrived, he parked but didn't turn off the engine. It's nice inside, he said. You'll see. I didn't move. Not because I resisted. Because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. With my hands, my face, my fear. A nurse met us at the entrance. Clipboard. Bright smile. Soft shoes. She spoke to Mark, not me. Used words like adjustment period, medication optional, low stimulation environment. I heard none of it. Only the way her voice never asked for my opinion. They wheeled my bag down a hall that smelled like lemon disinfectant and something deeper. Resignation. The walls were beige. Safe. Bland. Forgettable. Like the people inside them. They gave me a room with a twin bed, one window, and a call button that blinked even when I didn't touch it. The nurse showed me the closet, the bathroom, and left a laminated welcome sheet with my name at the top, but not my handwriting. Rest, she said. Then the door closed, and I sat, not crying, not angry, just still. I looked around. A painting of a pond hung on the wall. Generic. Too green. No photos. No violets. No rocking chair. No teapot. I opened my purse and pulled out my notebook. Still there. Still mine. I wrote, "This is the day my life became a visitor's pass." Then I underlined it twice. That night, someone knocked. A woman named Maggie. Wiry hair. Kind eyes. She was holding a deck of cards. "Room for one more?" she asked, smiling. I nodded. And we played gin rummy. In silence. Until the hallway lights dimmed. When she left, she looked back once. "I know what it feels like," she said. Then walked away. I placed the cards in the drawer beside the bed and tried not to disappear in the dark. The first night, I didn't sleep. The bed was too narrow. The pillow too stiff. The silence too unfamiliar to feel safe. There were no floorboards creaking from age. No soft hum of Tom's old clock by the window. Just air vents and faint rustles. From the room next door. A call bell rang somewhere down the hall. No one answered for a while. That sound, repeating, blinking, was the loneliest thing I'd heard in years. I turned on the lamp. Its light was yellow, not warm, like a waiting room, pretending to be a home. I rose, padded across the tile, and opened the closet. 3 wire hangers. 1 folded blanket. Nothing mine. Even the sweater I wore felt strange on my skin. It still smelled like my laundry soap, but out of place, like perfume in a hospital. I sat on the edge of the bed, touched my wrist, just to feel something pulsing, and I whispered, not to God, not to Mark, but to no one. Am I still in here? I didn't know. Not for sure. There had been no goodbye, no ceremony, no leaving of the key on the counter. Just absence. I opened my notebook. The paper welcomed me, more than any voice that day. I wrote, I used to be a woman, with a name on a deed, a voice in a room, a presence at the table. Now I am a file, on a shelf, behind a locked door, in a place I didn't choose. I closed the book and placed it under my pillow. It was the only soft thing in the room that knew me. The next morning, a nurse brought a clipboard. Can we confirm your emergency contact? She asked. I stared at the form, at the blank line beneath. In case of confusion or distress, contact. I didn't fill it out, because I didn't know if I wanted to be found by the person who put me there. Instead, I asked, do you have envelopes? And stamps? She blinked, then smiled. Yes, ma'am, I'll bring them after breakfast. I nodded, because I had decided what to do. If I couldn't leave the room, my words still could. I would write to the one person who still remembered Tom's voice, my wedding china, and the smell of violets in spring. Not Mark, not his wife, not even Sarah, but Hal Vernon, the old lawyer, who once said to me, Mrs. Goodwin, you're sharper than most men I know. He would listen. He would remember. And if he didn't, then I would remind him. Maggie found me in the hallway. On my 3rd day there. I was staring at the vending machine. Not hungry. Just watching the coil spin. Release. Drop. Something about it felt familiar. Like being let go. Without warning. She didn't ask how I was. Just stood beside me. Shoulder to shoulder. Ever feel like everyone's decided you're better off quiet? She asked. I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. Later, she brought me a cup of chamomile tea. In a paper cup. Not my china. Not even close. But warm. Steady. I used to be a music teacher, she said. 32 years. Then, my son told me it was time to take it easy. She smiled. But her eyes didn't. I didn't want to be rescued, she whispered. I wanted to be remembered. That night, I unfolded my letter. The one I had started in my head. During the ride over. Dear Mr. Vernon, I'm not confused. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not in need of oversight. I am being kept somewhere. Against my will. I paused. Let the truth settle. Then I added. And I believe that's still illegal. In this country. I folded the page 3 times. Carefully. Like folding a memory. You want to keep sharp. I hid it in the lining of a tissue box. And waited for the afternoon shift to change. There was a young woman named Eliza. She pushed the snack cart. Hummed Billie Holiday. Under her breath. I asked her if she liked old music. She nodded. Then I said, I need a favor. And I need it to stay. Between women. Her eyes narrowed. But she listened. I gave her the letter. Didn't explain. She took it. tucked it into her apron, and said, "I'll drop it at the corner mailbox." On my way home, I watched her go. It wasn't much. Not a protest. Not a lawsuit. Just one page. Leaving the building. In my place. But it was enough. Because that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through till morning. Her name was Ruth. My neighbor. Back when Mark was still in high school. She had white gloves. And a walk like she'd once danced. On polished stages. Widowed young. No children. But the best lemon bars. On the entire block. People called her eccentric. Because she spoke her mind. And wore brooches shaped like birds. Then one year, her nephew came to visit. He stayed. Changed things. The porch light never came on again. The garden grew wild. And Ruth faded. I asked about her once. At the grocery store. The cashier said, "She's at a place now. One of those homes." Said she was acting confused. I never saw her again. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a woman. Folded into a file. And filed away. I think about Ruth now. About how easily it happens. 1 month, you're hosting bridge night. The next, you're someone people refer to in the past tense while you're still breathing. And no one raises a hand. No one asks where you went. Because polite society doesn't ask questions about quiet exits. That morning, Eliza passed me in the hallway and winked. Said nothing. But I knew the letter was gone. And that meant my story was moving again. Even if I wasn't. I opened my notebook to a clean page. If I end up forgotten, I wrote, "Let it not be." Because I stayed silent. I drew a small violet in the corner. Because even now, especially now, I needed beauty to push its way through the cracks. At lunch, they served chicken salad and a fruit cup. No one spoke much. Across from me, a woman named Bernice stared out the window, as if waiting for a memory to pull into the parking lot. Beside me, Maggie reached over, slid her pudding onto my tray. "Too sweet," she said. "But you like sweet things." I smiled. It wasn't a rescue, but it was recognition. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. The postcard came 3 days later, wedged between a coupon flyer and a brochure for stair lifts. Eliza handed it to me. During the book cart round, her eyes didn't linger, but her fingers squeezed mine, just slightly. The front showed a watercolor of a courthouse in winter. Clean lines, gray skies, one lantern lit. On the back, in tight, familiar script, "Mrs. Goodwin, got your letter. You are not crazy. You are not alone. I'll be in touch soon. Hal Vernon." No greeting. No punctuation flourish. But it might as well have been a cavalry horn blown through the walls. I tucked the card into my notebook, behind the page, with the violet. Then I sat on the bed and let the afternoon light I fall across my knees. Like a blessing. They hadn't broken me. They had buried me. But I was still breathing. And now, someone was listening. That night, I didn't eat much. But I wrote more than I had in weeks. I listed the accounts Tom had opened. The lawyer who'd helped with our will. The name of the realtor who'd helped us buy the house. In 1978. It was all still inside me. Dates. Details. Documents. And I realized what they took was paper. But what I had was memory. And memory, if spoken aloud, becomes evidence. I flipped to the next page and began outlining Everything Mark had touched. Without consent. Every signature. I was told didn't matter. Every moment. I was asked to just trust. They wanted quiet. But I would give them clarity. And that, I wrote, is how a woman begins again. With a page, a plan, and the unshakable belief that dignity doesn't expire. The next morning, I brewed tea in the common room. Chamomile. Weak, but warm. Maggie joined me. No words. We sat in silence. As the first frost appeared on the window pane. Outside, the garden slept. Inside, I was finally waking up. Have you ever felt erased while you were still present? We invite you to share below. You are not alone. Hal called on a Thursday. I recognized the number. Before the second ring. Mrs. Goodwin. His voice steady, like it had been waiting. On the other end for years. Do you still have a copy of your husband's pension agreement? I do. And I did. Tucked between old Christmas cards. And the deed from 1978. Good, he said. Because I've reviewed everything Mark filed. And I found a few things. He didn't expect anyone to notice. There was no excitement in his tone. No drama. Just fact. And it felt like the first solid floor. Beneath my feet. In months. I'll draw up a motion. To rescind the power of attorney. But I'll need you to answer one question. On record. I waited. Are you, in any way, mentally incapable of managing your own life? I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it was the first time someone had asked. Instead of assumed. No. Hal, I said. I am very much alive. And fully aware. Then we begin, he replied. We didn't speak long. He didn't overpromise. Didn't try to comfort me. He just believed me. And that was enough. I hung up. And stared at the call log. Like it was a certificate of baptism. Then I walked slowly. To the window. The frost had melted. And underneath the bare hedges, green tips were starting to emerge. Maggie found me scribbling. On the back of a napkin. Plans? She asked. I looked up. Held her gaze. Seeds, I said. And she understood. That afternoon, I sat in the library corner. And began cataloging. Everything I still owned. That no one could touch. My memories. My stories. My words. I wrote. They can move my name. They can box my belongings. But they cannot untell. What I remember. The nurse on duty offered me a snack. I declined. I wasn't hungry. But for the first time in a long while, I was awake. Awake and waiting. With the patience of a woman. Who knows, she has already outlived their assumptions. The next envelope arrived. With Hal's handwriting. Blue ink. Precise. Firm. Inside were 3 documents. Simple words. But sharp. A revocation of power of attorney. A sworn statement of mental competency. And an affidavit declaring coercion in the transfer of assets. I read each one. With the care of someone handling thin glass. Then I signed them. Not in fear, but in clarity. I was not asking for my life back. I was declaring it never left me. Hal had also included a checklist. Send me copies of the following. It read. Old tax returns. The pension agreement. Bank statements from the last 2 years. And anything written in your husband's hand. I smiled. Because Tom never threw anything away. That afternoon, I opened the cedar chest again. Ran my hand across the folders. Like a woman choosing which key to insert into a forgotten lock. I found an old letter Tom had written to the county when we paid off the house. In it, he wrote, This house is the last thing I will leave her. She has earned it more than I ever did. I read it twice. Then once more. Out loud. To an empty room. Not for proof. For strength. Then I took photos. Of every document Hal needed. Each click of the phone camera felt like a strike of quiet thunder. I printed them. In the activity room. Under the pretense of making a scrapbook. Maggie watched. Didn't ask. Just nodded once. And said, "Let them underestimate you." We sealed the envelope together. As we did, Maggie whispered, "I've always believed silent women are the most dangerous kind." I didn't respond, but I folded that sentence into myself like armor. That evening, I sat by the window and wrote 2 more pages in my notebook. The first was a list of what they took. The second, a list of what they couldn't. I titled it, "My Legacy." It included my dignity, my memories, my will, my name, and the story no one else could tell for me. And I knew, even if they never gave anything back, I had already taken something they couldn't undo. Control. The next letter I wrote was not to Mark. It was to the foundation Tom once donated to, a small scholarship fund for women returning to school after 50. I asked one question. "Do you accept property gifts made in honor of a late spouse?" They replied in 2 days. With gratitude and paperwork. I read every word. And I signed again. This time, it felt different. Not like surrender. Like strategy. The portion of the house that had been left in a dormant trust, a piece Mark hadn't noticed, hadn't touched, was now reassigned. To them. To her. To me. The clause stated, "Irrevocable transfer. In memory of Thomas Goodwin. Dedicated to the dignity of women. Reclaiming their voice." I didn't tell anyone. Not Maggie. Not Eliza. Not even Hal. Some victories grow best in the dark. After lunch, I walked to the activity board. In the common room, someone had written this week's quote in blue chalk. "Justice need not be loud. It need only be complete." I touched the edge of the board, smiled, then returned to my room. There, I wrapped Tom's letter in an old linen napkin and placed it beneath my pillow. Then I opened my notebook to a clean page, and I wrote, "I am not restoring what was lost. I am rewriting what comes next." That night, Mark called. For the first time in weeks. "Mom, I heard from a lawyer today," he began, his voice tight. "Is everything okay?" I said only this. "Everything's beginning." He didn't know what I meant. Not yet. But he would. Not through confrontation. Not through shouting. Through documents. Declarations. And a legacy he would never inherit. Because dignity, once reclaimed, is no longer negotiable. And I had made sure. Mine had a future. He couldn't sign away. The room was colder than it needed to be. Not in temperature, but in tone. A polished table. 12 chairs. Neutral walls. Neutral faces. Mark sat across from me. His wife beside him. Hands folded. Smiles thin. Hal stood at the end. No flourish. Just steady presence. A quiet wall between me and everything they'd tried to take. A young associate pressed record on a small device. Hal began. "This is a formal reading of asset realignments and legal transfer notifications, per the request of Helen Goodwin." Mark shifted. His wife glanced sideways. Hal continued. Unhurried. Unbothered. As of April 12th, Mrs. Goodwin has officially revoked all previously signed powers of attorney on grounds of coercion and lack of informed consent. He placed a document in front of Mark. And another. And another. With this revocation, she resumes full legal and financial control of all previously assigned assets. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. A rare moment. My son. Speechless. Hal didn't look at him. Instead, he turned to me. Helen, would you like to read your statement? I nodded. Took the paper from my lap. Not because I needed it, but because it kept my hands steady. I read. This is not revenge. This is restoration. I was not lost. I was overwritten. You took my name from the deed, my voice from the table, and my presence from the life I helped build. But memory is a stronger architect than greed. Mark cleared his throat. Tried to smile. Mom, can we not? But Hal raised one hand. Let her finish. And he did. And they did. No interruptions. No excuses. Just the sound of a woman reclaiming the shape of herself in the room where she had once been invisible. When I finished, I folded the paper and placed it in front of me. The silence was its own kind of sentence. Final. Heavy. Undeniable. Hal adjusted his glasses. No rush. No triumph. Then he pulled out a final envelope. Thicker. Cream-colored. Tied with a violet ribbon. He placed it gently at the center of the table. This, he said, is a certified declaration of irrevocable gift. Filed and accepted by the county registrar. Last week. Mark leaned forward. Brows furrowed. What kind of gift? Hal didn't answer him. He looked at me. Waited. I nodded. So he opened it. Read aloud. In memory of Thomas Goodwin, a portion of the Goodwin property has been transferred to the Legacy Foundation for Women 50+ to support their education, housing, and legal independence. The words echoed. More than spoken. They settled. Mark sat back. His face pale. His wife still. No. He said softly. No, you didn't. I met his eyes. I did. He blinked. Like trying to wake up from something he never thought would touch him. But that land. The orchard. That's where we were going to. I raised a hand. Not to interrupt. To finish. It's where your father planted every tree. By hand, I said. And where I buried the first letter he ever wrote me. Mark didn't speak again. Hal added one last thing. The remaining funds in the dormant pension account have been reallocated into a named trust, not accessible by any immediate heirs. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. Mark slumped slightly, as if something unseen had finally been lifted or lost. There was no shouting, no breaking of ties, just a quiet, complete reversal. I stood, gathered my scarf, my pen, my notebook, and I said one thing. Before leaving that room, legacy is not what you take. It's what you leave behind. On purpose. Then I walked out. Not escorted. Not dismissed. Just whole. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard him say it. Why didn't she tell me? His voice. Low. Almost a whisper. Not angry. Not pleading. Just stunned. I paused behind the frosted glass pane. Beside the door. Didn't look back. Didn't speak. Because there are things you don't explain to people who didn't ask until it was too late. Hal's voice answered him. Even. Quiet. She did. Just not in words you listen to. Silence. Long. Solid. Then footsteps. Slower than before. Dragging a little. Like someone who had finally felt the weight of what they lost. I stepped outside. The autumn air was sharp, but it didn't bite. Not today. I sat on the bench, beside the courthouse steps, unwrapped a butterscotch from my coat pocket, the kind Tom always carried, just in case I got lightheaded. I let it melt slowly. Across the street, the oak trees had started turning. Amber, carmine, burnt gold. Nature's quiet announcement that something was ending, and something else was beginning. A car door slammed in the distance. But I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag and pulled out the postcard Hal had sent me weeks ago, ran my thumb along the crease, folded and softened by use, but still intact. Then I turned to the back, where I had added something. In my own handwriting, justice doesn't need to roar. It just needs to be heard once. I closed my eyes, not to forget, but to listen to what was finally no longer missing. And somewhere deep inside, where memory meets breath, I heard Tom say, "You did good, Helen. You held the line." And I had. Not with fists, not with fury, but with a steady hand, a clear voice, and the kind of silence that doesn't shake. It waits. And when it finally speaks, everyone listens. Is this justice? Or was it too harsh? What would you have done? The apartment was small. A second-floor walk-up, just above the town's old bookstore, and across from the church bell that rang only on Sundays. It had one bedroom, a kitchen just big enough for two, and windows that let in light. Without needing to be asked, I chose it, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. No signatures but mine on the lease. No one else with a key. No welcome mat that felt like a lie. Just me. And the second act I wasn't supposed to have. The first morning there, I unpacked slowly. One box held the teacup, with the cracked rim. I placed it on the windowsill, beside a pot of lavender that Maggie had sent, with a note that simply read, "You remembered me. Now remember yourself." I stood in the doorway for a while, just breathing. The walls smelled like paint and possibility. The floor creaked a little near the radiator. It was the kind of sound that meant no one had tried to make things too quiet. I liked that. On the desk. A desk I found at a second-hand shop. For $40 and a smile. I laid out my notebook. The one with all the pages they thought would never leave that nursing home. I opened to the last entry. Read it once. Then turned to a blank page. And I wrote, "I am not a chapter they forgot to finish. I am the pen." That afternoon, I walked to the post office. Bought a new sheet of stamps. On the walk back, I passed a woman sitting on her porch, with a radio playing low. Billie Holiday. I stopped. She looked up, smiled, nodded. We didn't speak. But that's how recognition feels. When you're older. Quiet. Mutual. Earned. Back home, I brewed tea. Used the good china. No guests. No reason. Just dignity. The mail came late that day. A small envelope. With no return address. Inside, a thank you card. From the foundation. A young woman named Lila had received the first grant from the Goodwin Legacy Fund. She wrote, "Your gift is letting me go back to school. I want to become a nurse. To take care of women the way my grandmother never was." I held the card in both hands. Let it sit in my lap. Like something sacred. I thought of Mark. Of Sarah. Of everything that had been said. And unsaid. And I realized, for the first time in a long time, that I didn't need anything back. To feel whole, I just needed to know that something I planted was still growing. Somewhere beyond me. Some nights, I still wake early. Not from fear. Not from grief. Just from memory. softly knocking. I get up, wrap the shawl Tom gave me. On our 25th anniversary. It smells like cedar and thyme. I sit by the window, watch the street lamp flicker against the brick across the way. Below, the bookstore owner always forgets to lock the side gate. I like that. It means some things still belong to chance. The heater clicks on, the kettle hisses, and the silence isn't empty. It's earned. Each morning, I write 3 things. Not in my old notebook. That one's full now. But in a new one. Fresh. Hardback. Deep green. I call it the after. Today's entry. 1. I am still here. 2. Violets bloom best in second soil. 3. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetfulness. I place the book beside the lamp, next to a stack of letters. From women I've never met, but somehow know. Some write about sons. Some about houses. Most about the long silence they've been forced to carry, like a purse too full of what no one else sees. One woman wrote, "I didn't know what dignity sounded like until I heard yours." Another simply said, "Thank you for reminding me that I still belong to myself." These letters, they don't fix the past, but they prove we're not disappearing quietly. We're documenting the quiet. And in doing so, we are making noise. The world can't ignore anymore. Sometimes, I walk by the courthouse. Not to revisit. Just to remind the sidewalk that I passed through and didn't flinch. Other times, I leave violets on forgotten graves. Not because I knew the names, but because someone should. I still make tea. Still write. Still listen to Billie Holiday. On the crackling radio, I refuse to replace. And every time I do, I remember. My story didn't end when they locked the door. It began the moment I wrote it down. If you've ever been forgotten, erased, or made to feel like you no longer matter, let this be your reminder. You are still the author, and it is never too late to write your second act. Justice can be quiet, but it is never weak. You are not alone. We invite you to share your story below. My story didn't end when they locked the door. It began the moment I wrote it down. If you've ever been forgotten, erased, or made to feel like you no longer matter, let this be your reminder. You are still the author, and it is never too late to write your second act. Justice can be quiet, but it is never weak. You are not alone. We invite you to share your story below. And if this story found you at the right time, to stay with us. Subscribe to Kamar FM for more true stories of dignity, memory, and quiet power, where every story is a second chance.